Rory and Scotty have given Taylormade the dream season with 3 out of the 4 majors won. However, considering the equipment they used, if you're Taylormade, are you delighted or are you annoyed? Option 3, Taylormade is far smarter than we give them credit for, and actually compared to 20 years ago, maybe they don't mind as much what the pros are actually winning with. Guys, how you doing? Welcome back to a brand new video. Simon here, SAS Golf Academy, and what a weekend the Open was for golf, and realistically highlighting, yes, some equipment, and obviously a big topic I want to talk about today, but realistically for all of us that watched the golf over the weekend, what truly makes you a better golfer, and actually how brands don't necessarily rely on tour pros using the latest and greatest, because they've got other avenues to now do that for them instead. Because don't get me wrong, any pro that you've obviously got on the books winning a tournament, especially a major, is a big tick in the box for the brand and obviously exposure. And we'll briefly cover some of the great buys, I think, that in both Rory and Scotty's bag, not the same makeup, but obviously the great value of those clubs now in the second-hand market. However, Taylormade is one of the best in terms of contributing newest equipment to their players' wins. In the past, for example, Rory hitting 360, 370 yard drives with a current driver that had been released that year would be slapped all over social media. However, if we look over the major wins this year, for example, there's been very slim pickings from Taylormade's point of view of really what to take out of Scotty's and Rory's bag in terms of the newest, latest and greatest tech actually contributing to, well, anything. And obviously I find this fascinating as, again, my whole channel is built around second-hand equipment. However, it goes deeper than that, and realistically why I think Taylormade is really clever in terms of their promotion and their social media, and realistically where everything's going in the game of golf, and let me explain why. Back in the day, let's say 20 odd years ago, something like that, there was 3 main ways of advertising, let's say, a new product. You had obviously tour pros, the equipment that they had in the bag, and then obviously the news of that equipment winning a tournament. You had TV ads, so in between obviously the tournament we had these kind of slick ads of pros, and I kind of want to talk about that a tiny bit more. And then obviously magazines, your Today Golfer, your Golf Monthly, all that kind of stuff. But let's focus more on that golf advert, the one that slipped in when obviously the players were in the playoff or it's getting towards the end of the tournament, and you had that Titleist advert, that Taylormade advert, that Ping advert, and how scripted they were. Obviously sometimes funny. I remember the Nike commercial back in the day, but a lot of it, if you would remember, would be pros going, this is the fastest driver I've ever hit. The ball speeds and distance I get off this is second to none. The feeling, the sound. And the main message is there's absolutely no way I would ever use an old driver compared to, well, let's say the newer one. And also, I must say, if we go back 20 years ago to now, there's a big difference in terms of head design, in terms of the amount of carbon we've got in the heads nowadays, the weights that they put in there to move that CG, the shafts especially. So actually, when we think about it, I think there's some kind of truth to those adverts back in the day compared to potentially the differences that pros are looking for in their game nowadays. However, before we go through their bag, the pinnacle of technology and design is so twisted in our game, and why I feel so many amateur golfers, including myself, never realistically reaching my full potential as a golfer, is where we spend the most time, effort and money. And there's no question through our game when it comes to marketing and excitement and buzz is all around this thing right here. Every November, every December, we see leaks, we see images, and the whole golf world lights on fire with excitement and anticipation of what the newest driver actually will be. And let this weekend be a very quick reminder to any of you guys that want to get to single figures or potentially better, that this thing arguably could be the least important club in your bag. And Rory and Scotty very evidently showed that, especially day one, and Scotty just threw the tournament anyway, even though his driving did improve. Both of them hardly hit any fairways day one and still shot 3 under, which is just incredible around a golf course of that difficulty. We're not playing fairways that long and tight, with rough that long and that thick, yet the amount of times we expect to hit 10, 11, 14 fairways around, and the amount of times that I hear, oh, if I just could get it down the fairway each time, I'd be a great golfer. And let that Open that we just watched over the weekend be testament to that even if you're the best player in the world with some of the most consistent driving statistics as well, everyone's going to have an off day, and therefore you need to fall back on the one part of the game that should be 100% consistent all the time, and that is our short game and putting. But I've been a coach long enough to know wedge play and putting isn't sexy. That's not going to sell headlines. Pros not using the latest, greatest equipment definitely will sell headlines. Actually, this is the first time that I remember that since Scotty moved to Taylormade, he hasn't adopted the brand new driver. Always thought that was interesting, especially from, let's say, the Taylormade stable, where Rory is kind of fluttered between older models and newer ones. And to be honest, from memory, this is the first time I've known Scotty not to go to the newer model. When the Stealth came out, the Stealth 2 came out, the QI10 came out, he always went up to the newest model and put it straight in the bag, and obviously used it to great effect, which I always thought was quite admirable, because as much as we like the idea that new equipment, shiny equipment in our bag would be a godsend, if you had to change your equipment at that level every 6 to 8 months or a year with a different driver head, different shaft, and you're so in sync to that swing weight, that feeling, that torque, that head design, that loft, that carry distance, that is a skill in itself to be able to make that kind of adaptation. It's why we see those kind of certain fairway finders or certain clubs that have a really important carry distance never leave Tour Pros bags. Like fairway woods is especially one. We see tons of Tour Pros use older fairway woods. In Scotty's case, it's this Strixon ZU85 driving iron with lead tape on the back of it. This thing goes for around 60 pounds, 80 pounds, something like that. And it's been a weapon with him for a very long time. He only took it out the bag to put a 7 wood in the bag when he won his last major because he needed height. Driving irons don't produce height. Head design, 7 woods, lofts do. That's not because the QI35 7 wood was better than the Strixon driving iron. They have two completely different jobs. Not to mention, both Scotty and Rory use pretty old irons, i.e. yes, they're blades, very similar head designs, basically just forged pieces of metal on the end of a stick, and it goes to show that at their level, there's downsides of tech. They don't need big forgiving heads like the majority of us do. They need loft, they need spin, they need to know that that 7 iron, that 8 iron, whatever it might be, goes that certain distance. And let that be a lesson to a lot of us. Distance isn't everything in this game. Knowing what a certain club does, i.e. a gap testing, knowing what yardage it can go, and also if hit really well, how far can that club go is super important in not putting your shots into trouble. Lastly, from the equipment standpoint and kind of the limitations that we've made and why familiarity, confidence is so crucial when it comes to the short game, the approach game, Scotty's got Titleist SM8s in the bag. Can you imagine how hard Taylormade have been in terms of trying to potentially get those clubs out the bag with the best wedge fitting you could possibly have, the new grooves every single week. And don't get me wrong, those SM8s are going to still get replaced. However, technique, strike, familiarity, the weight of those clubs, Scotty knowing all the way up to 110 yards, every single different swing with every single different wedge to go that particular yardage in that particular position with that particular amount of spin takes incredible confidence and ability. And to be honest, when it comes to wedges, technology can't realistically give you that, especially when wedge grooves are arguably one of the most restricted parts of our game anyway. Which brings us on to the last point of this video that sums up everything, because driver sales are sexy, long drives are sexy. Long drives, lots of fairways equals a lot of sales, especially when it comes to the tour level. However, with the equipment over the last 5 years being so good and pros realistically at that level with Taylormade's quite small stable of Colin, Tommy Fleetwood, Scotty, Rory, let's be honest, the only thing on their minds is majors at this point, and they couldn't care less what piece of equipment gives it to them. Even if that does mean an older, more familiar club that they've had in the bag for a while, well then you lean on the other avenue that I think Taylormade and Callaway have done a fantastic job, I guess, over the last 3 to 4 years in terms of diversifying their portfolio of awareness. And let's be honest, in 2025, and let's say excluding the majors, especially the Masters, the Open, the PGA, let's put all 4 of them up there. What golf is the everyday golfer watching nowadays? I don't think all of us are watching the PGA every week. I don't think we're all watching the DP World Tour every week. What I do think that we're watching is a lot more influencers, great drivers of the golf ball, great iron players, great wedge players, sometimes not even great golfers, but obviously great personalities, and the ability to hold retention and make golf enjoyable to watch for an hour, sometimes 2 hours in a YouTube video. And the only difference I see between, let's say, contracted tour pros and contracted influencers is that influencers, rightly so, and I don't blame them, have brand new everything every year. Probably because the risks aren't too high, and obviously, let's be honest, the games aren't anywhere near as obviously as in tuned, as high up as, let's say, your tour professional. But unlike necessarily the TV ads being scripted and people going, oh, these are the fastest, best things I've ever seen and heard, and to be honest, there's some of that. It's just more product placement, that driver in their bag when they hit one down the middle, or the off-the-cuff kind of moment where they hit a great iron shot, a great wedge shot, and they look down at their brand new gleaming X, Y, and Z and go, this is the best club I've ever had from this distance. And you as a viewer go, actually, yeah, that probably would suit and help my game. Not to mention, and what I think Taylormade does better than most, is use their stable of players on social media in terms of fun videos. And I'd almost argue in 2025, those particular golfers off the golf course and not in a major can be just, if not more influential with new products in their hands, regardless if they're not then going to use it in 4 weeks' time in a completely different environment. And as Scotty showed over the weekend, you don't need the latest and greatest. You need clubs that you're confident with. And even then, at best, sometimes they're still not going to agree with you, which is why you should focus a very good portion on 120 yards in on this game, because on the good days, you can double down on that. And on the bad days, it will save you from having a terrible score. Guys, thank you ever so much for watching this video. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Any questions, sasgolfacademy.com. Catch you guys there.